the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. This morning we continue our examination of two more issues on the local ballot. In the second segment, we will look at State Issue 1 concerning the age of judges, but we begin with Issue 38, the Hamilton County Children's Services Levy, which funds the care of abused and neglected children who are placed in the care of Hamilton County Department of Job and Family Services. This is a responsibility mandated by state law to the counties. The local levy raises the funds to carry out that responsibility, but if it didn't exist or wasn't passed, the county is still responsible for delivering the services to local children. The cost simply would have to be paid out of the county's general fund, which was facing a $13 million deficit. Issue 38 is a 5-year renewal of a levy first adopted in 1981. A yes vote will continue the 2.77 mil rate first adopted in 2001. Property owners will pay $51 for every $100,000 of valuation. In other words, exactly what you've already been paying. Even though the millage rate has been held constant because of the decline of property values, the yield for the Children's Services Levy, $39 per million per year, will be almost $2 million less than currently collected. In addition, this levy will now have to pay $2 million a year for services through the Bureau of Children with Medical Handicaps. In the past, that came from the Health and Hospitalization Levy, Issue 37, which we discussed last week. The effect of that, even though the tax rate remains the same, the yield has been reduced by nearly $4 million a year for the core services delivered by this levy. To discuss the issue, number 37, which has no organized opposition, I am joined now by Moira Weir, the Director of Hamilton County's Department of Job and Family Services. Ms. Weir joined the department in 1993 as a children's services worker, so she has firsthand experience with the importance of the funds raised by this levy. And the Reverend Damon Lynch Jr., the pastor of New Jerusalem Baptist Church. Reverend Lynch, along with others, is the co-chair of Issue 38, and you're also the co-chair of Issue 37. Amen. So you're out there this year.
Working hard.
In both cases, welcome back to Newsmakers. Moira, give us some sense of the kinds of services that we're actually talking about here. What does the Job and Family Services do for children, and how many children are affected?
Well, we touch 1 in 12 children in this county through the child welfare system.
1 in 12?
1 in 12, or at any point in time in a year. And the levy really supports the child welfare system that we know in this county. You were talking about the money that we actually bring in, that $38 million, actually we use for federal match for dollar, so we're able to draw in some federal dollars to meet that. So it's critical because it brings in about $79 to $80 million in totality, which we really need to provide services to the families and children that we deal with.
And that match, those monies are also going for children's services?
It's all children's services. So to give you an example, it operates our 2-for-1 kids line. So that's the reporting line that we're mandated to have. We take reports of child abuse and neglect, 7 days a week, all day long, 24 hours a day. We do investigations. We provide a lot of in-home services to families because our goal is safety, permanency, well-being, but safety being primarily the objective right away, but to provide in-home services so that children can stay within their family system. So we really work hard to figure out how we can keep the family intact. So we provide a lot of ongoing services there, in-home services, counseling, therapy, substance abuse services. In the event that a child has to be removed, we have to then, we look for either relatives or family members or a foster care placement, which is very expensive. I think we spend about $29 million a year in placement costs. And then hopefully we can then work with the family to get the children back home. In the event we're not successful, and we do this really with the collaboration of lots of providers, the court system, so we're not by ourselves. Sometimes we have to actually look for another plan for the child, which could be adoption, and then we work really hard to recruit for our children to be adopted. So on any given day, we have about 900 children in foster care and about 235 children waiting to be permanently committed in terms of looking for an adoptive home.
Wow. Damon, as you're out there in the community, what are you hearing about the services that are needed by the children of this city, of this county? And are you having a sense that the need, as we're in this economic decline, we're in with a lot of joblessness, are the needs up in this area to care for our children?
Of course, the need is tremendous, and I can't underestimate that. Being a minister and a pastor for 41 years, adoption and foster care is a part of our main tenet at our church. We preach that people ought to be involved in adopting and dealing with foster care. But beyond that, as you spoke of, the need is tremendous. I've never seen it as great as it is. A lot of the children are growing older and opting out of foster care, but yet they have not been given the necessary tools to make it in this country, in this city, wherever they go. And a lot of them are aging, and they have mental problems, and those problems turn into crime. So it affects the whole community if we do not treat these children in the manner and the way they should be treated. And I'm just wishing and hoping and praying that this levy will be passed because it's so needed. Also, being a pastor, the Lord says that the children are a heritage of the Lord. So our children are precious. And everybody's not able to be born in a caring, loving family, but yet they are human beings and they need the care that other kids get. So that's where we come in. So I'm hoping that there will be some compassionate people who will go to the polls on November 8th and punch yes for this children's levy.
Maura, on sort of following up a little bit on what Damon was just saying about the need, as we've gone through the last few years, have you noticed not just a change in the number of children who need, but sort of who in our community is maybe asking for assistance that maybe traditionally didn't have to ask for assistance?
No, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, the cases actually are more severe now. We see a lot of violence in the home. Families are stressed because of financial, economic reasons. Substance abuse is on the rise. People might not be taking their medication if they have mental health issues, which then exacerbates the situation at home. So the cases are far more complex today than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, which requires a lot more really patience. I'm really working closely with families and trying to really figure out how we can help them. So, and the need is great. I mean, families are tapped out. Their family members are tapped out. They're trying to help each other, and the resources are shrinking. So we really are finding that although the numbers have been sort of stagnant, we are finding we're spending a lot more time on every case, and it takes longer to kind of help the family get issues resolved and for us then to close the case. Because our goal is to get out of their lives and that they can function healthy and happily without us.
I want to put this in a larger context in terms of your agency as well. Over the last 3-4 years, what's happened to the numbers of people working for Job and Family Services, and how has that impacted the area of children's services? Does this levy make sure that there are workers there for those children? Have the cuts come other places? But give us a sense of the total amount that you've had to cut over the past few years.
Yeah, as an organization, and the total, our funding's been reduced by 50%, and as a result, we've lost 50% of our staff through that. The levy has been critical because it's really, in terms of our frontline child welfare workers, we have not had to reduce staff there. We've been able to keep the front line pretty stable. Sometimes we weren't able to always fill a position, but we didn't need to reduce those staffing levels. So the levy is critical because it really helps pay for the actual workers as well as the services that we provide for the families that we're working with.
That's why the church is so critical. The pastors teach and we foster care. And we have programs in our churches. My church, we have a program for adoption, a program for foster care. We have people like Moira come out from her where she is and bring the information to the congregation, and hopefully people in the congregation will then buttress what they can't do now, what they used to be able to do because of lack of funds. So I think it's a win-win if the community, the churches, and all of these other paraprofessional agencies get together, and we can win this battle, because a lot of these children, when they grow up, they are affected by crime, and then crime affects us, and then that's the bottom line. Then you're paying for it somewhere. You're paying for it down to the sheriff's office or in juvenile. And so why put it there when you could put it on the child so that the child can grow, be productive, and go on and make a contribution in society?
Yeah. A lot more,
Yeah.
a lot smarter up front than
Right.
it is, and a lot less expensive
It's right.
up front with the children. You know, I've been aware over the last few years that your department also has become much more aggressive on letting people know about children who need adoption. And as an adoptive parent myself, I mean, that is really important. I get emails all the time about a child who is looking for parents in a home. You've become much more aggressive about that.
Yes, we have. I mean, I always say it's never too late. I mean, every child, if you think about a child, deserves to know that this is my home forever. And
Right.
so we never want a child to leave this, the system without a home. So whether they're 15 or 18, I think it's our obligation to really engage the community to help us find permanency for all of our children. I mean, children need to know that they are going to be loved forever and that they're going to have a safe home. So I'm glad that you're reading our emails.
Dan, you can remember the time when we fought the battle of cultural raising a child. Child needs to be raised by its own culture and all that stuff. So glad that that fight is behind us now. We won that one. You see so many cross-culture situations now where children are being adopted by people who probably don't know their culture, but they're coming to learn their culture. And so that's a good thing because the child is the paramount person in the whole network of trying to make sure that they're raised properly. And whomever does it, if it's black, white, yellow, red, as long as that child is what Moira said, is with a loving adult and is being given the needs and taken care of in the way it should be taken care of, you got to win.
I'm just about out of time, but I just want to clarify this last point, which I was mentioning, that now this levy is going to have to pay for the services by the Bureau of Children with Medical Handicaps. I have to say, I wasn't aware of this at all. What's your view on that?
It's something that has to be covered. I mean, it has to be paid for. So, I mean, we're working with, we'll manage that and we'll figure out how to do it. So it's, I mean, I think through the years we figured out how to manage our budget and we'll continue to do that. But certainly the levy is
that's
critical.
coming over to your responsibility without any additional support, though. I think that's the point I was.
Correct.
Yeah. And how many children are involved in that area?
That changes actually year to year. So it could be, I mean, it could be 2 million this year, it could be less in a year, it could be more. So it really, there is no threshold for that.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank both of you for all of the work you do in the community with our children and with so much else. And it's great to have you back
God bless
on
you.
this show.
Yeah.
To learn more about the levy, check out www.voteforkids.net. There are always some issues on the ballot that take voters by surprise when they get into the voting booth. I predict that this year, Ohio Issue 1 will be a surprise. Stay tuned and make sure you understand the issue. Yes. Okay. Okay. Count me down to where the close will start, okay? Welcome back. Sometimes issues are confusing for voters because of the technical ballot language. Other times it's not that the words are confusing, but it isn't clear what's the driving the issue or what the implications will be. Ohio Issue 1, which is on every ballot in the state, falls into the latter category in my mind. The primary provision of Ohio Issue 1 would be to raise the maximum age at which a person could be elected or appointed a judge from 70 to 75 years old. Judges elected before either of those dates would then be able to serve their full 6-year terms, just as somebody elected at 69 can serve until the rest of that term, or if this is raised to 75, they can then serve it out. Other sections of the constitutional amendment would remove the power of the General Assembly to appoint courts of conciliation and the governor's authority to appoint a Supreme Court commission. To help bring clarity to Ohio Issue 1, I am joined this morning by Judge Pat Fischer, a judge on the 1st District Court of Appeals that sits in Hamilton County. Judge Fischer is the president-elect of the Ohio Bar Association. And Marianna Bettman, a professor at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. In 1993, Professor Bettman became the first woman to be elected to the 1st District Court of Appeals. In 1996, she ran for the Ohio Supreme Court and has been a professor at the law school since 1999. For both of you, welcome to Newsmakers. Pat, let's begin with, we'll do this, Judge Fischer.
Either way is okay with me.
Let's begin with, where did this come from? Who's behind this amendment? Who wrote the language? Who cares about this?
Ironically, it comes out of the legislature because it is a constitutional amendment. It was originally co-sponsored by the Democrats, a woman named Fendi out of Willowick. And she had spoken to some of the judges up in Lake County, and they were coming up for a time where they would have to retire and were still vigorous and vibrant and wanted to continue on the bench. And they asked her to sponsor it, and the legislature has to pass it by 3/5 vote in both houses, and it passed 3/5 in the lower house, actually by more than 3/5, and actually in the Senate, it was either unanimous or 32-1 in favor of passing it.
Okay, so from the Bar Association's perspective, because that's one of your roles,
yes,
is the Bar Association in favor of this?
They do. They support it for several reasons, age discrimination, a few others. They think also you're losing a lot of very experienced judges at the prime of their intellectual vigor. The other problem they raised, and the State Bar supports it, is many people become judges who have been in the government practice, either as prosecutors or public defenders or as judges and move up the ladder. They believe by extending the time you can get more private practitioners to have a second career and to run maybe 2 times for judge instead of just once.
Okay. Professor Bettman, what's your reaction on the age question here? Is this an active concern? Is this something from your perspective that you see that this change, there's a driving need for the change or a justification for the change?
Well, first I'm going to admit, Dan, that I am conflicted on this, and I can kind of see 70 approaching on my own personal horizon, not so far in the distant future. First, though, I want to clear up what I think is a misunderstanding about this issue. I think the ballot language is absolutely clear, but I think in the way it's being presented to the public, there's some confusion that the purpose of this amendment is to raise the mandatory retirement age from 70 to 75. It isn't 70 now, and it's not going to be 75 if this passes. So that's a point of confusion. What's going to change, certainly judges will be allowed to serve longer, but how long is kind of the luck of the draw of your birthday. Now, if your birthday was before age 70, you could run, as you said, till you could stay on the bench. You could run at 69 and serve 6 years. If this passes, you could still be elected at 75 and therefore remain on the bench till 81. Now, I think people really have to understand that. One of the things that bothers me is the human nature factor, as Judge Fischer and I were discussing this before. Human nature has a hard time, Dan, giving up power and knowing when it's time to call it quits.
What about that, Judge? I mean, and that is the question. How are judges, in the federal system, by the way, where judges are appointed for life, there's a different set of questions because judges can literally go on forever. In Ohio, though, is there any supervision of whether a judge has gotten to the point, no matter what their age, that they can't really fulfill their duties?
Actually, there's more supervision of judges than of legislators or state-elected government executive branch officials. Executive branch officials and legislatures can either be thrown out by election or by the General Assembly impeaching them. Both of those apply to judges, but also the Ohio Supreme Court regularly reviews judges' performance and throws them out or disciplines them if they're not doing a good job. And any judge who's been disciplined, their chances of re-election are pretty slim. So there's actually more supervision.
But how frequently does that happen on issues of just ability to keep up with the docket, which may be signs of age, and ability to grapple with all the issues?
It used to be very seldom. Now it's becoming very likely. Literally a judge over in just Highland County about a year ago was disciplined for no other reason than he wasn't moving his docket fast enough, and he wasn't even near retirement.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be around age.
No.
So the point, though, Professor Bettman was making, that people could misread this, that this is about retirement ages being 70 and 75. We do want to make clear that this is not that at all, that people can be significantly older than
This
that.
is the last time somebody can run for office. That's what this is about.
Okay. I guess one of my questions, and Professor Bettman, you do a blog, and it gets published in City Beat and the Israelite, I guess, right?
Not so much, not City Beat anymore, but
Not City Beat anymore. Okay. But I guess one of the questions that you've raised recently is this the issue we need to be dealing with on judicial reform? You know, sort of, okay, this is about age, but is this really what we ought to be dealing with?
I think that's a very good question. I think there's some far more serious issues, such as the effect of money in judicial races and the increasing politicization of judicial races. Are they really becoming much more like the political branches? Interestingly, our late Chief Justice Thomas Moira, who I think everyone revered, and just parenthetically, he couldn't have run again under the current system because he was 70 right before he passed away. He would not have been able to run again under the old system, but he would have under the new. But he was focusing his attention on the method of choosing judges and was trying to revive an idea that he had put forth several times before to change the method of choosing judges so that appellate judges, such as Judge Fischer, and Supreme Court justices, such as himself, would be initially appointed and then run for retention elections. He had tried that several times. He hadn't succeeded, but he was really trying to take one more shot at that in a meaningful way. So I think money and perhaps rethinking what a term should be, perhaps one longer term, one 10 or 15-year term with no re-election possibility. Those should be on the table for further evaluation, Dan, and I think just as important as this issue.
From this perspective of the Bar Association, are those sorts of things, and whatever the suggestions might be, this whole issue of electing judges, and it's very difficult for the voter out there to understand what's really going on. It's my biggest frustration on this show, is trying to help people understand judicial races. Is that being talked about as well?
Absolutely. The Bar Association actually was working with Chief Justice Moira, putting together a group to try to change the method of electing judges in every issue that Professor Bettman just mentioned. But it's even more than that. If you're looking at qualifications, actually the legislature in the last term lowered the qualifications to become a judge at the minimum level. They changed it right now, or prior to the change, you had to be practicing in Ohio 6 years to become a judge. Now you can practice outside of Ohio for 4 years and practice in Ohio for 2 years and run for judge. And it's worse than that. If you think about it, you could practice outside of Ohio for 5 years, waive in without ever taking the Ohio bar exam, and run for judge after 2 years of practice in Ohio. I mean, the state bar has taken out a very extreme position arguing with the legislature to change that.
I want to get back to issue one for a moment, and there's, besides this when a judge can be elected question, and that's the big thing in this, there are these two other parts of this. Courts of conciliation and General Assembly, Judge, what is it? and why do we need to change it?
It's more of a cleanup. They were in the 1858 Constitution. They were left in under the 90 or 70 Constitution, and no one uses it. No one does anything in it, and it's kind of like a vestige, like your appendix. You could just take it out and no one notices.
Okay.
So there's.
But when you get there, it is on the ballot, and it's like.
Now, just so people know, it really is like cleaning up, or you're writing an article and you scratch out stuff that's irrelevant. That's what's going on.
Dan, can I say one more thing about
Sure.
the ballot issue, which has to do with just the peculiarity of this year's election, and that is placement. Issue 1 is, of course, with issues 2 and 3. where there is a great deal of attention being focused. So what could happen is, depending on which side people feel about 2 or 3, they might come in and decide, well, I'm going to vote no on 2, so I'll vote no on all of them, or I'm going to vote yes on 2, so I'm going to vote yes on all of them. So there's an odd and curious sweeping effect that could occur with issue 1 just because of the intensity of people's feelings about the other 2.
Well, and I got to get out, I'm out of time, but people who were here for issue 37 are very worried that they're so far down the list that people will have worn out. Thank you very much for helping us try to understand this, and thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Remember, if you missed a show, especially one focusing on this year's election issues, recent programs are streamed on our website at local12.com. You can find Newsmakers under the programs drop-down tab. Have a good week.
Yeah.